The Captain's Log Radio, with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome to the Captain's Log Radio Show. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss, and with me I got Captain Jeremiah Joost Miller. This dude, my brother from another mother. This guy is a fishy cat. We both are on the Florida Fishing Products pro staff, ambassadors for FFP. That's how Jeremiah and I met. Dude, welcome. Welcome to the show, man. So good to have
Thanks,
you.
man. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, first, let's start about with where you're at, your guide service. What are you focusing in on? Right now it's January, it's a little chilly, but take me into your guide service where you're at.
Yeah, man. So yeah, it's cold January. I know the same thing down your way. It's just been brutal. Wind and it's typical this year. Nor'easters nonstop. So pretty much border Georgia right here. So my stomping grounds pretty much are anywhere from southern Georgia, kind of down into Jacksonville, but primarily focused right here in the kind of a naturally deep harbor right here in the St. Mary's Inlet. So we have the St. Mary's River, the Amelia River that kind of meet right there, and that's our little estuary. So we have a lot going on, year-round fishery for redfish. So it's a spectacular place to visit, and even if you're not fishing, there's tons of historical stuff here with Cumberland Island, Fort Clinch. So there's always some for everybody to do here.
If I'm not mistaken, you're running multiple boats.
Yeah, so I kind of slimmed down. I went from 3 boats. I had the flats boat and a little polling skiff. Actually, you haven't even seen the new little polling skiff yet, so I don't know. We might be on that one next time. But yeah, and then I have a bigger bay boat, we have a lot of tourism here in the summertime, so I'll hit people with parties from 3 to 4 people, so that kind of leads me into the bay boat, and then I'm on that pretty much all summer tarpon fishing. So and then with that, we have a big submarine base here. So we have a long jetty on the north and the south end, and I'll do a lot of big bull reds out there in the spawn. And when they come in the river in the, August, September, October, I'm still on that. And then this time of year, I'm pretty much on the skiff the whole time, backwater, chasing redfish, sight fishing, fly fishing, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's where I'm at now.
Awesome. Yeah, I think having multiple boats is really key to success in guiding, especially here in Florida. I've got 2 boats. The new boat is on the way. I actually will have 3 boats. The
Oh,
current
man.
skiff's going to go into storage for a little bit and get some TLC done to her. Um,
Nice.
but I'll be, pulling out of the new Kayo. And then I've got a 22-foot Pro line. I'm getting ready to outfit that. I got a trolling motor on that one. I'm
Killer.
waiting for a new battery. I'm putting a lithium battery in that. So
Nice.
having multiple boats, dude, can
Yeah.
really, and you said it. You said it as people come in and they have these larger parties, having
Mm-hmm.
a boat to be able to take people. My pro line, I can do myself plus 6. I understand I can do myself plus 7, but I don't like to advertise that to people and
Yeah.
families. I've done it a few times and it's chaos. I call it chuck and duck because everyone's chucking lures and I'm ducking around. But having that the ability to take more people fishing, and then with technology and having spot lock, if you want to fish the inlet,
Absolutely. Yeah.
got deeper water in the river down here where we can get out of the rough.
Sure.
There's so many things we can offer. Or hey, if you don't want to go fishing, you just want to go look at manatees and dolphins and
Yeah,
birds, we can accommodate for that as well.
absolutely. Yeah, it opens up a whole new game. It's a tough place here to have just one boat. There's not really that all-around boat here because, this time of year I'm fishing shallow, shallow. So
Mm.
I need that ability to get skinny. And then in the summertime, it's like I need that ability to have spot lock, and I'll do some dock fishing on the bay boat as well this time of year. But yeah, primarily I'm on that skiff pulling most of the time, but it's been windy.
What's your focus right now? Redfish and trout, flounder?
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. The red fishery is great this year too, man. I think us implementing that regulation, in what, like 2022, we're really seeing the benefits of that. So I'm seeing some big schools and big fish. It's just been, trying to get out there when conditions are conducive. It's been the name of the game. So,
Mm.
and the trout fishery too this time of year. And I don't do a ton of sheep's head. I don't advertise it, but if guys want to go, we'll go on that as well. That's phenomenal this time of year. Flounder kind of moved out. They're in like the deeper inlets and offshore, and then the sheep's head kind of come in. So there's still I mean, it's just there's still a lot to do. It's just playing with the weather.
Yeah, yeah. Playing
Yep.
with the weather. That this time of
Hmm.
year in January, people think, oh, well, it's just a little wind. But the
Right.
style of fishing we're doing and the boats we're doing it, there are few places to really hide. Can you hide number one from the fish? Can you get to the spot that you can not hide from the fish, hide from the wind? Excuse me.
Sure.
You don't want to hide from the fish. We want to find those guys. Can we get to the spot that's protected from the wind?
Yep.
That's
Yep.
that's one of my thinking points. And if that shoreline is protected, uh, is there fish there? You
Sure.
know, so
Yep.
there's so many variables this time of year for captains, for guides to get out on the water. I had a buddy of mine text me today. He's up in South Carolina. He's like, "Bro, this weather's killing me. I've had so many cancellations
I know
because
already.
of weather." Yeah,
Absolutely. Yep.
I don't know how the offshore guys do it.
I don't either. I think I saw a couple guys getting on like a couple like when it just went real light northeast, but I mean we're just not getting those offshore days anymore. It's just very far and few between, and they're targeting sea bass and stuff right now whenever they can, and
Yeah,
snapper always out there on the wrecks. But yeah, it's been brutal for them, man. So I think we're starting to see a lot of guys starting to jump on smaller skiffs, and they're starting to compete with us. So just kind of how things shifted. But
yeah. Well,
yeah,
yeah, I feel for those guys. They got to make a living and they got to get out on the water. And if it's too
yep,
rough, and you've got families that show up from up north, and man, it's going to be too bad. And it's can't
right,
go. It's
yeah.
that's not like they can go next week. It's got to go when they're in town. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
I feel
tough.
for those guys.
Luckily, like I'll try to back up something, well, let's go see horses and dolphins and manatees and stuff of that nature. But some of my guys are here to hardcore fish and fly fish, and even the tarpon season this year was a little brutal for us, man. The mullet run was a little fickle. A lot of wind too, not a lot of good days for that. So I know even you and I were talking about, trying to do some tarpon stuff
Yeah.
and just fell through again. So
Tell me
um,
about are you guys, I know you're far north. We're talking,
yep.
for those who aren't familiar, we're talking north of Jacksonville. Jeremiah is right on the border. I mean, he's doing a lot of fishing in the southern Georgia, but he's right on the Florida Georgia line. I'm not talking about the country band. I'm talking about the actual Florida Georgia line.
Yeah, not
Have
to
you
give
seen
away
some?
any good spots, but yeah, like that whole spot's just it's not as pressured, Like even the southern end of our island, we're starting to see a lot of inundation from other guides from down south, and a lot of those schools of fish I used to fish. Now you'll pull up and there's a couple boats pulling some of these flats. So
Have you seen any
I've
snook
creeped
up
away.
there?
I've stayed up north. I just bought a house up there too, like real close to a boat ramp that's like right off the inlet. So it's just kind of been like my game getting to know it all up there, and I've been kind of
Mm.
stuck up there lately, but. It's different, man. Like yesterday, we had a low tide with rain beating down all day and today. So I just know the water's gonna be dirty for like 2 days.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
a lot of the flats this time of year, it gets ridiculously clear. People don't realize how crystal clear it gets when I'm fishing up there. But in a good day, I mean, where we've had some good winds and it's not bad, it can be phenomenal sight fishing up there.
Mm.
So
Mm.
yeah, it's a lot of playing with the weather this time of year, as you know.
Are you seeing any snook that far north?
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Actually going to talk to you about this. So I was pulling some flats, like some of those flood tide flats we fished. We've got little mangroves growing, little dwarf mangroves growing on them, and
Oh,
some of the spots were all trout fish, just like floating shrimp and stuff, float rigs. Like I've been getting snook at them for a good 2, 3 weeks in a certain like springtime. So
wow.
not big, 20, 24 inches maybe max. And I had a couple buddies that got in here that got some bigger ones, but yeah, they're
Hmm.
trickling up here. It's crazy.
Cool.
Yeah,
I'm hoping those fish this time of year are going to migrate. I'm hoping they're either going to run at
right.
the inlet, try to get all the way to the bottom to the warmest water,
Sure.
or start going south. I had so many
Yeah.
dead this last week in the Mosquito Lagoon.
I couldn't imagine
Uh,
that freeze.
oh, bro, I was,
Yeah.
and it wasn't even the water, it wasn't even freezing temps, but
Yep.
it got down in the upper 30s. The water temp
Sure.
got to 45. I had snook. Um, it was very strange. They were alive, but
Yeah.
they were dying. But they would
Sure.
put their face in the mud and they were almost tailing. And then they'd sit dead still, belly up, but face in the mud. And then every once in a while they'd move their tail and then be dead still again.
They had the ick,
Um,
man. They weren't feeling it. That's
dude,
a drastic change. What did the water temperature go to before it hit that?
it went from like 59 to 45
Yeah,
in
that's a
like
huge change.
overnight.
Yeah, and it just
Overnight.
stayed like that too. It was just days and
Yeah.
days of it.
I
Yeah,
even
it's
had
brutal.
one, I had a snook swim
Hmm.
to my boat. And like it was so lethargic. It didn't see or feel or even care. It swam to my boat. I got off my polling platform and I grabbed it and I lifted
No
it out of
way.
the water. And I was like, "Oh, buddy, man,
Yeah,
I wanted to put him in my live well and drive
right.
him to a spot." I was like, if I get caught,
Right.
if I get stopped
Out of season.
out of
I'm just trying to
season,
help.
you would, I would promise them I was just trying to help. I would get in so
You'd be
much
like, oh,
trouble, but I
sure,
was
buddy.
like,
I've heard that story before.
we've finally getting snook. Like it's been
Yeah,
consistently really, really good with the snook.
that's
And s-
awesome. That's how it
see
should be. And
those
the grass
fish.
back
Yeah.
there is coming back as well, if I'm not mistaken, right? You got a lot
Yeah,
of
it's
grass
it's
coming
coming
back.
back really good. So
Good.
having those snook, we go out and we target redfish and trout. It's like, well, all right,
Yep.
we're good. Let's go find us a snook. And a
Absolutely.
lot of times we've been catching snook first because they've been so aggressive. Calm
That's
morning, if
killer.
it's warm, throwing a top water, watching them blow it
Yep.
up, throwing parallel to the mangroves.
Oh,
So
there's
to
nothing better.
have them, see them dying last week, it's just
Yeah,
like,
that's tough.
not it's not fun. But
Not at
yeah,
all.
the fishing up there, I really believe a few things over the last couple of years have attributed to it just blowing up. Everybody I talked to in that from like St. Augustine to Europe to Amelia Island area is
Hmm.
just like, man, our red fishing have just gotten really, really good over the
It
last few
has.
years. And I think a
It's
big part of that, I can't prove it, but I
hmm
think the redfish in Mosquito Lagoon left
sure.
because we lost our grass, we lost the
Yep.
habitat for our baits, and I think they
Yep.
swam north, ran out
Sure.
of Ponce Inlet. We're like, all right, we're gonna go till we find. I know I give
Yeah.
fish a lot of credit, but I think they had that conversation like we're gonna
No,
go till
no,
we find what we're looking for,
yeah,
and they
no
did.
doubt.
Hey, we're quickly coming up on our next break. We'll be right back. The Captain's Log Radio Show. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss. Hang tight. We'll be right back.
This is the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio Show. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss. And before we get started on this next segment, I want to invite you to check out all of our social media pages at the Captain's Log TV on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Love to connect with you. There's so much more conversation that we can have outside of the radio show. And I want to hear about your fishing. I want to see and hear what you're catching. So reach out to me at the Captain's Log TV on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. With me today, I've got Captain Jeremiah Joost Miller, who's a full-time guide up in the Amelia Island area, which is in the northeast section of the state of Florida, right on the Florida-Georgia line. For the break, we were talking about just cold temperatures and fishing inshore, and seeing just so many changes lately and how difficult it can be for us full-time guides to get out on the water because of the just the northeast winds. This time of year, it can be really brutal. But one of the benefits to having our colder water, our colder temperatures, and when that water cools off, it does clean up some of the algae blooms that we experience in our estuaries. Right now, dude, Mosquito Lagoon is crystal clear.
Oh, I
And
bet. By this time of
our
year, I would imagine so. Yeah.
with our grass growing back, having that clean water, clear water, that sunlight penetrating through all that
Sure.
photosynthesis, the water's really low right now and it's cold, so it's moved a lot of those manatees out. So
Yep.
grass growth should be hopefully propel us
Good.
into summer with a lot of new, fresh, clean water and thick grass, man.
Good. Good, good. That's what you want for that area.
Yeah. Now up where you're at, you've got a different kind of grass. You have a Spartina grass.
Yeah, so basically, so on the flood tides, summer, warmer months around the new moon and the full moon, that's where the main focus is. Anything for us locally around like a 6.5 or above on the tide chart. And if there's a little onshore wind, you might put it in a little deeper. um, we'll hit those flood tides on the grass, and like you got to experience, man, it's just
Yeah.
a unique thing up here. It's special. You get to see them tailing on the incoming. If you're there early, like we were, you get to see them kind of cruising in and backing in and setting up, and it's like like a flip just switched, and then just bam, it's on, and tails everywhere. So that's probably my favorite thing to do. The low
Oh,
tide here are amazing. That's probably what, primarily what we focus on this time of year is all the low tides. And you'll get back and fish and every once in a while some tail and fish as well on the low tide. But there's nothing like seeing them in the grass up here. And I think that's what we
oh,
really got to be known for.
yeah. So what he's talking about is the flood tide. We've talked about this on the show before. Flood tide fishing for redfish is one of my favorite things to do. And the episode that Jeremiah and I filmed together, um, we were staged. We went and fished the higher tide first. There was a lot of water. No, excuse me, the low tide first. There was a lot of water. We were fishing around oyster beds and some rocks,
Yep.
looking for redfish and trout and flounder. Where I'm at, I don't have a tide. Mostly where I'm at in the southern portion of the Mosquito Lagoon and then the northern portion of the Indian River, there's no tide. The northern portion of the Mosquito Lagoon, there is some tide, but not like what people experience in other parts of the state. So we fished, excuse me, we fished, caught some redfish, caught some trout, caught some flounder, and then it was okay, time is getting close.
Yep.
And it's amazing, we were staged up waiting for that water to rise. And
Yep.
just like us, the fish were staged up. They were
Oh yeah,
waiting for
they
that
will.
water to get up.
And sometimes you'll see them enter the back. They'll get in a little feeder creek, and that little flat will fill in from the back, and you'll see them come from that way. So you're always trying to not block that entrance for them. So
Yeah.
when you're in these areas that you get to know, you're trying to allow them to not feel pressured to come up. But yeah, that's my favorite thing to do is just be there on the beginning of that tide, and it really is on fire on that first part, and it's about an inch of water filling in every 5 minutes on an average
Wow.
time for us when it gets that
Wow.
close to the new moon or the full moon. So it's a lot of water moving, and then you
A
saw
lot
how
of,
fast it moved out as well. You don't
yeah.
want to get stuck up there, so
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, so we staged up. We're watching the water rise, and what was ground, dirt, what covered in fiddler crabs,
Yep.
is now filling up with water. And these redfish, they know. It's
Oh yeah.
amazing how they know when to move in and when to move out. And you
Absolutely.
have you have a window. What is the typical tide? How long does that typically last for you to have a flood?
And it depends on the wind again. If you have an offshore wind, it might not fill in as quick and it might go out early. But if you have an onshore wind, if it's, that typical nor'easter, it could, some of them will go from 2 to 3, 3.5 hours. So it
Mm,
just depends. Some of them get too high as well. So some of the areas you normally fish where you find lower ground, you're hoping the water will fill in. Those will get too high. And the fish are up there, but you're not finding them.
mm,
So you'll find higher ground at that point. So you got to have some spots for those 7 foot to 7.8, 8 foot tides we get as well. But the good magic number around here that we need usually is like a 6.9, and that's a good
mm.
good 2 hour tide or so. But it goes fast. But there's a lot of opportunity in that short bit of time. You could have 15, 30, 50 shots sometimes. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes some of those evenings, and especially getting into fall, those morning flood tides, those are electric. Those are the ones I look forward to.
So tell me about what's your approach? Or if we're doing fly,
Yeah,
what's your go-to? What do you want to throw?
man, I love the gurglery just because it's a top water experience. But they're gonna knock that thing out of the park. So the success rate's not as good. So that's for the guy,
Oh,
not trying
really?
to. Yeah, I mean, some of them, I do well with some of them. I don't know. A lot of them, they get aggressive, but it's a
Hmm.
good tool to have. And I'll tie mine with a thick weed guard, so they slide through the grass well, and they ride.
Yeah.
I've had guys tie them with the hook down and hook up. So different styles, but I
So if
always
you're
like
not
focusing on the
familiar,
gurgler.
yeah, gurgler is a top water little, almost like a popper, very simple fly to tie. It's only got a couple of materials on it. It's usually a craft fur tail. It's got a foam body that you end up wrapping your thread around, but then it folds back over, wrap the thread, and it gives you that lip, which creates that bloop sound when you're popping it.
Yeah,
And I like to throw material. Uh, some people use a staz as to create like a body,
sure.
around the foam. I
Yep.
found I didn't find it. I was told about this material that I got at Hobby Lobby,
Oh,
and
nice.
it's called Gilt, Gilt, and
Oh,
it's
okay. I'll have
like
to write that
three
down.
dollars, dude. It's three
Okay.
dollars for like 5,000 feet of it. Like you
Oh, that's
don't
what I need.
need all of this. But I got it in a purple. I got it in a black and gold. I
Nice.
got it in a silver. It's real
Nice.
flashy and it's real just kind of big. And so I trim it up to make it look like little legs. If you're looking at a shrimp, the
Yep.
body of a shrimp, they
Yep.
got these little legs on their
Oh, yeah.
underside. And
Yeah.
I really feel like that material looks a lot like the shrimp
Imitates that.
legs. Yeah,
Sure.
and it's
That's neat.
and it's
I'll have to
it's
check that
cheap
out.
and it's easy. It's got flash to it.
Yeah.
But I love the gurgle. That's
Oh,
that's a great
absolutely.
spot. Do you
They're
ever
they're
throw
they're great.
anything? Go ahead.
I mean, I like throwing weighted stuff, little
That was
crabs,
where I was going.
imitation crabs, and black and purple is a huge go-to of mine. I do well with, you know, tans and browns and stuff of that nature too. I get a lot of guys just bringing their own things. But the funny thing is, they're up there slurping crickets as well. So you could almost throw a little bit of anything. You could get reactionary strikes out of these fish. For the main thing is just putting it in the right position. And for the guy, a lot of them, not having that slack in the line and being ready to strip set, when they pop. Because sometimes they don't even know they're eating. And I'll see that boil and I'm yelling strip. So
Yeah.
kind of I'm not as big on the fly as long as it has a good weed guard and you can get it in the spot. I think the fly selection up there isn't as paramount as most people would think. They're
Mm.
redfish, they're not as picky, but
Now,
um,
one thing with redfish, you were saying they were knocking the gurgle, like missing it.
yeah. So I mean, as you know, just the way they're designed for topwater, having that
Yep.
inferior mouth that hinges from the bottom, they're meant to
Yep.
trap. So it's fun to watch, and you will hook them. I mean, you'll get, but just the success rate isn't as good as a dumbbell fly or a weighted fly.
So if you're not familiar, okay, like this snook behind me is a lot like a bass where their mouth can open really big. Same with the tarpon. I love throwing
Yep.
gurglers at juvenile tarpon. They have a big
Sure.
mouth and they'll stuck it in. But
Yep.
the way a redfish is designed, that inferior mouth, meaning it's on the bottom side of their head. Okay. So for them to open up and eat something on the surface, they have to get their whole head
Yeah.
out of the water and slurp in. There is some slow motion videos online with redfish coming up and slurping poppers. And like
Sure.
usually you see that coming out of Louisiana, and it is
Yeah.
unbelievable because you see the
Oh yeah.
whole fish,
Oh
this
yeah. They
huge
gotta come up.
face coming out
Absolutely.
and eating it. Now that is why a lot of people miss those fish on the surface, but man, knocking the fly, that's kind of nuts, dude. I had
I've
a
had them
guy,
fight over it before, man. I've had two of them coming in and just intersect and
oh
knock on
heck
it.
yeah.
Oh yeah. Yep.
I was fishing. Uh, I can name drop. It's but he's become a good friend of mine. We've actually done an episode together.
Yeah.
Brenton Roberts. We were down in. He booked me for the first time. He was working for Florida Sports. He's still working for Florida Sportsman,
Yeah.
and he came and fished with me on the lagoon, and he was throwing a gurgler, and
Yep.
same thing happened. Bull reds were chasing it, and he hooked up, and he came tight, and
Yeah.
we're laughing and screaming, and bloop, it came out. It came
Oh
unhooked,
yeah.
and I was like,
Yep.
just keep stripping, keep stripping. Another one came up and smoked it. So I love a top water bite,
Oh,
man.
absolutely.
Even if it's like a
Yeah.
plug. I
Yeah.
love throwing top water and seeing fish come up and explode.
I think that's probably my favorite is that visual experience, it's hard to beat. No
Oh
doubt.
yeah. And I don't think it matters freshwater or saltwater,
No. Oh, no.
exotics,
Yeah,
seeing that
absolutely.
explosion. One of my favorite things to see is
Yeah.
get down in South Florida and you're throwing a frog
Yep.
parallel to the shoreline. The way those canals are dug, it just drops off really quick, and you just throw parallel underneath like a tree if there's any kind of overhang, and you bring that frog across, and a snakehead will come
No
up
way.
and just destroy it. Or
Yeah,
throwing
that's
throwing
something I need to do. I need to get on that canal game down there. That sounds
that's
fun.
so much
Peacocks
fun.
and yeah,
But it's
absolutely.
it's all about that explosion. Hey, we
Yep.
are quickly coming up on our next break. This is Captain Jonathan Moss. I got Captain Jeremiah Joost Miller with me today. We will be right back very, very quickly here on the Outdoor Radio Network.
This is the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio Show. It's Captain Jonathan Moss, and I've got Captain Jeremiah Joost Miller from up in the northeast portion of the state of Florida. We're talking flood tides. We're talking redfish. We just got done talking about our favorite presentation on fly, throwing a gurgler at these fish on the flood tide. And Jeremiah hit some good points. Hey, if you find the right fish and you make the right presentation, it doesn't really matter what you're throwing. It's so crucial, though, to put the fly in the right spot. Same with spin. When you're sight fishing, making the right presentation is key. Making the right presentation is key. I say it all the time. 3 things have to happen for you to be successful on the water. Number 1, me as the guide, I have to take you to the fish. Number 2, you have to make the presentation. If you don't make the right presentation, number 3 can't happen, and that's the fish has to eat. So I
Yep.
take you to the fish, you got to make the right presentation, and the fish has to eat it. If any of those 3 fail, you're not catching fish. And when
That's
you're
it.
sight fishing, that number 2 part really comes into play. You
Sure.
are leading a fish. You're not just hitting the fish on the head. You're not casting it 10 feet away and hoping it swims in your direction, especially when you're fishing on a flood tide where they're moving in the grass
Yeah.
and they could turn on a dime, decide to go anywhere else.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I always say for spin, I give them, it's a little louder, it's a little clunkier hitting the water. So you got to be careful with that, and it'll throw out a little bit of a wake as well. But yeah, you can't lead them too much because they just change direction so much. So I lead it a little bit further than the fly. And it's tough for the spin guy. He doesn't have that advantage of picking up that line and resetting it as easy. He's got to reel it
Yep.
back up. So I try to keep that rod tip up real high and reel it back in on top of the water as quick as possible, trying to make as least amount of noise and hitting grass as I can. But
Yeah.
you and I,
That's the tip right there.
yeah, we had a
That
funny, we had a funny catch. Remember that story on the boat? We were reeling one back in, and one ate it right on the way back in the boat.
yes. I was looking at another fish and I
I didn't
threw
even
at
see
that
that
fish.
fish. Didn't see
Yeah.
it.
And then I was reeling in to make another presentation because the fish
Yeah.
moved. And I was ripping it back. I wasn't just like, okay,
Don't know
every
how
time
he got
time.
that, man.
I mean,
No.
I was like, I
Yeah.
gotta spin a reel right here. I was cranking as
Oh,
fast
that
as I
thing was
could.
smoking. Yeah.
Yeah. And that fish just lunged for this lure. It was unbelievable. And I love that. I
No,
love
I
that.
loved it too. That was a
But
cool way to get it.
you said something so important. Okay.
Yep.
When you're casting at a tailing redfish,
Hmm.
okay, you make that cast, you flip your bail over by hand really quick, rod tip up, and you're reeling
Yep.
as fast as you can. Not as fast as you can, but fast enough to keep your lure on the surface.
Yep.
Okay. Now you know exactly where your lure is.
Yep.
You
And
can
that's huge for
bring
the
it
guide as well. I need to
you
know
can
where it
bring
is.
it to the fish
Yep.
and drop it down. And you're right. That's huge for me in the back of the boat because then I can coach. I
Sure.
can communicate. And we
Yep.
know as the angler, you know where your lure is.
Yep.
When it goes
Yep.
below the surface, you can guess.
Sure.
But when you can see it, you know exactly where it
Yep.
is and where that fish is in relation to the fish. So huge part. What are you
Absolutely.
throwing? Is it plastics? Are you throwing? Would you prefer a shrimp over a paddle tail? What's your
Shrimp
go-to
work
fish?
great. Shrimp work great up there as well. I've kind of just zoned in on one thing. I've gotten it down to what I really like. It's just a heavier lure. It's made by Exude. It's called a RT Slug, and
Okay.
I've gotten really good success with them. I've really never had much problems with them, so that's kind of just what I've stuck to. And I'll pair that with a twist lock, so like a 3/0 twist lock with 16th ounce little keel weight on it, and you have one handy.
I got one right here. So this was
Um,
an eighth ounce
yeah,
owner
yeah,
twist lock,
I
three
love
aughts.
them, man. They're hard to beat, and
I'm
it's
not
just
familiar
that
with this
ridiculous
bait you're talking
presentation.
about.
Yeah, they're
Is it like a Cinco?
yeah, kind of. It has that similar shape. It's not a tube, but it's more of a it's just kind of like a little jerk bait almost. It's essentially just a long jerk bait. It's just
Okay.
real heavy. It drops really well and gets through the grass and pierces the grass
Split
really well.
tail at the end.
It doesn't. No, it doesn't have a split tail. It has this weird little, I don't even know what it is on the end. I've never seen it on anything else. Um, but man, I turned on to them 7, 8 years ago and just never really stopped using them. Um,
How
but
long are they?
they're 4 inches.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, little paddle tails will work great too, man. I mean, you could just use the regular old chartreuse tail with root beer, and
Hey, you know what
that
they say? If
if
it
it
ain't
ain't chartreuse,
chartreuse,
it ain't no
there ain't
use.
no use.
You know it.
That's it,
I
man.
always have confidence in that. But yeah, I have guys, man. I have guys that come out bass fishing. They'll throw topwater frogs out there, you know?
Yeah.
So again, I don't believe the bait selection is a paramount. You could throw shrimp, little crabs. For me as a guide, it's just getting something I'm confident in. You know, everybody has their own
Yeah.
little thing, and I've seen multiple things have high success rates up there. But yeah, that's mostly what I'm throwing if nobody's really.
If I'm brand new and I've never done it before and I want to go, what are you doing for rod and reel?
For rod and reel, just that typical setup we have, just like a 7 foot rod. I usually use, man, those little 1000s have been awesome from Florida Fishing Products. I love them.
Yeah.
The 2500s are great, but I've got a lot
The,
more 1000s in the arsenal right
the
now. So I'll do
1000
that.
still have 20 pounds of drag.
It's insane. What do you need? I mean, you don't need much more.
We
Uh,
were we were in Louisiana
yeah,
and we had the prototype 1000
yeah,
and fishing was terrible. I mean,
yeah.
it was freezing
I've heard some
cold.
brutal days there this year.
It was awful. This was years ago. This was
Yeah.
4 years ago. Yes, yeah, 4 years ago. Anyways,
Well, it's good to hear they struggle sometimes too, because that's
yeah,
usually not the
right. I
story.
know. I know. It's not good when you're filming a TV show and you get no
No,
content. But we
no.
got off the water and we went to this like dock, like bait shop.
Yeah.
Then they're dropping so many baits in the water on accident. Like they got a giant pen of shrimp that's in the water. Okay.
Okay.
So they'd show up with a shrimp boat and they just empty out shrimp into this giant pen. And so there's drum and all kinds of stuff around the dock. So we got one of them 1000s in a fresh shrimp and a jig head and just dropping it straight in the water, like cane pole fishing. And that
That's epic.
1000, 20 pounds of drag. We turned that fish, got it fish to the boat, or actually to the dock. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't catch the fish.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
my main camera guy, Jack, he was the one who
Yeah.
caught the fish. And in fact, he was the only one who caught fish in 2 days of fishing, and he caught it on that stupid dock. And I was like, this trip was
Oh, hilarious.
expensive, and I didn't catch a single fish.
This is a
But
long drive.
yeah, it was a long drive, dang it. But oh man, those 1000s are a
Oh,
blast.
they're
So,
impressive. Yeah, I have people get on the boat and they look at it and I'm telling you, don't doubt it. Just wait. And I mean, we'll have a lot of bonnet head bycatch and the bonnet heads just smoke it, and they turn everything, man. They're impressive. I've actually jumped tarpon on them,
cool,
everything. They're
cool.
impressive little reels.
What do
But
you what are you doing for line on that 1000? You doing
I'll
like a
I'll
10
pair
pound
it with
braid?
like 10 pound braid. Yeah, it just casts well and it's got the perfect durability for that. I'm not really structure fishing too much. If I'm throwing shrimp at like docks and rocks and stuff, I might beef up 15, 20 pound. But Yeah, I mean, and then here in the winter, I might go down to like a 15-pound leader, but usually it's just
Mm.
20-pound leader, fluoro leader, your typical setup.
I got
Um,
some right here. Yeah, I'm using that Florida Fishing Products Affinity
oh, it's
10-pound
amazing.
leader.
It ties really well for tarpon too, making tarpon leaders. It doesn't have a lot of memory in it. You take it off the spool and you don't have to stretch it out forever.
Yeah, exactly.
I used to run
It's
a
been
lot of
very
different
impressive.
stuff trying to figure it out, and it's impressive how well I'm a huge believer in it. So, yep,
And
that's
they
all
make
I'm
it
using.
all the way. I think I don't know if they do 100-pound.
I
I
think
know they have an
I know I
80.
have 80. I have a lot of 60 and
Yeah,
80.
I've got an 80 right here.
Yep, the
And this
coral
is the
pink one.
this is the coral pink.
Yeah,
I use that for big tarpon or
me
big
too.
snook or for
Yep.
cobia if you're around structure going offshore.
I haven't had
Um,
any. I love it, man. It's been huge. Um, and tying knots with it, blood knot and everything.
yeah.
Well, everything holds well with it. It's
Well,
impressive.
if you're new to this style of fishing, I want you to hear you don't need to buy anything new. I mean,
Yeah,
please, if you want to go buy some 1000s, go do it. You want to buy some more leader and some more plastics, go do it.
right.
But the setups you have a 7 foot to 7'6" medium or medium light,
Mm-hmm.
even a medium heavy, if that's what you have, it can do it. A 1000 to a 4000 series a reel, 10-pound or 15-pound braid on those reels, 15 to 20-pound leader. This is stuff you already have.
Sure.
And then go hit these flood tides.
Yeah.
Go call Jeremiah and be like, yo, bro, I've never done this. I want to go experience something new. It is, I'm telling you, top 5 favorite ways to fish, maybe top
Yeah.
2 favorite ways to fish for redfish. Probably my number 1 favorite way to fish for redfish.
That's saying a
Because
lot from you. You fished a lot of
it's
different.
it's so much fun. It is
It
so
is.
exciting. It's a sight fisherman's dream.
It is.
And those fish are hungry.
They're aggressive.
They're there to do one thing. They're there to
Absolutely. Yep.
and
Yep.
we talked about it. You said a 2 hour window.
Yeah.
Those fish know.
Mm-hmm.
And when that water starts flowing off, they're moving.
Oh yeah.
And you get, if you're aggressive and you start bouncing fish to fish to fish, you can put a lot of fish in the boat. But if you're not paying attention, all
Sure.
of a sudden you're not seeing fish. It's like, oh, wait a minute. I'm not seeing
Yeah.
fish, but now I'm seeing the bottom.
Yeah.
You're going to want to get stuck. So these fish have figured it out, and it is
No doubt.
such a sight to experience.
Absolutely.
For the camera guys, they have so many opportunities to catch fish that are happy and
Sure.
tailing, fish
Sure.
who are backing. It is an absolute beautiful,
For the
beautiful.
camera guy, I've taken guys out and we haven't even fished it. We've gone out there and just videoed it, and that's a really neat experience. And it's tough for some guys to do. I get it, but
Yeah,
it's a really neat way to see fish and learn how they feed and what they do.
that's it. It's about
It's
learning.
phenomenal. Yeah,
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 when you put the rod down, and you mentioned it earlier, you're looking for these lanes where
yep,
these fish want to come and enter onto those grass flats, onto that Spartina for the flood. When you
yeah.
sit back and you take a moment, and we're quickly coming up to our next break, when you take that moment to look and listen and pay attention, it's amazing. It is amazing what you can learn. Hey, this is going so, we're having so much fun. Jeremiah, thanks for being here. We got one more segment. We'll be back very quickly.
This is the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome back to Captain's Log Radio. I am Captain Jonathan Moss. We are in our last segment of the show with Captain Jeremiah Joost Miller up there in Amelia Island. Love that place. We went there a couple times as a kid. We actually looked at buying a house there when I was a kid, and kind of wish we did. It'd probably be worth a whole lot more money now than it was
We had
back
a
then.
little, oh man, yeah, we had a
I
little bit of
love
a
that
gold
area.
rush here. The property value just skyrocketed here the last
Everywhere, dude.
10 years.
Everywhere.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you would have got in back then, oh yeah. Whew.
Well, we would have been friends for a lot longer than we have been. But
I know.
let's transition. We've been talking about redfish and trout and flounder and fishing the flood tide, throwing fly, throwing spin. When we originally connected,
Yep.
the plan was to chase after tarpon.
Yep.
Okay. And you're telling me, Jonathan, you got to get here. It's Nat
Yep.
Geo. These fish are airing out on baits. There's no one around. It's just me. We're gonna crush it. And I said, "What are you throwing?" He said, "Oh, we're throwing artificial." And I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, bring a fly rod. You want to catch one on a fly rod? Bring a fly rod." I'm like, "How big are these
Yeah.
fish?" He goes, "They're big, like jumbos, like 100
Oh
plus."
yeah.
I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" So of course, twists my arm. Dang it, I'm
Yeah.
there, and it didn't work out. Weather got us, fish moved, hurricanes come through, it moves fish around, mullet runs change and get
Yeah.
affected by weather. So we went and did the flood tide thing,
Yep.
tried doing it again. We rescheduled and tried doing it a different season, and still same deal.
Yep.
Sometimes, things don't line up. I tell people all the time, it's the hardest game of Tetris
It
I've
is.
ever played.
It
Lining up
is.
my schedule, the guest captain's schedule, camera guys, weather, everything's got to fall into place. But let's focus in on tarpon.
Sure.
Tell me about your tarpon season. When you normally start seeing them, and how do you like to fish for them?
Yeah. So, man, we're lucky around here. We get a good migration, They come up from down south and we get the Atlantic ones and we get the big ones,
Hmm.
So those start coming in. We'll start seeing them, slowly June, late July. By August time, it's about full swing. So August, September, October, those are like the hot months.
They're
But
traveling north when they first
yeah,
come up.
so we were doing some stuff. I got on with Bonefish Tarpon and Trust, and they got done tagging a lot of them, so we were learning that a lot of them were going really far north. And then we
Hmm.
started doing like a fin clip dietary isotope study, so kind of studying more dietary needs of the fish and learning about their bait fish and a lot of them, chasing the pogies and the menhaden out there, and so all that data has been huge, but. Um, yeah, the last 2 years have been a little bit of a sore subject. It's been a little tougher. The This year, same thing, kind of hurricane came, cold front kind of deal, and just dropped the water temp overnight. And they're very temp oriented, so
Yeah.
they ended up back south. And I know down south went Nat Geo for the mullet run. Man, I was getting videos from buddies down there, and it was just going off. So we didn't get it that good this year in the bait pods. For us, we were more focusing on, and this is kind of the last 2 years I've been doing this more with the changing out intermediate fly lines and actually having a rod with something deeper on it. With our
Huh.
deep jetty here, they've held up at the jetty. And so with the bay boat, I've got a few different things I'm hitting them on. I'll do a lot of side scan just because I know where they're going to be. They're just typical spots and little dog legs in the jetty. So I'll fish them on the way out. And then I've been implementing a lot of Garmin Live Scope the last few years for them as well. So
Hmm.
whether it be in the bay pod or on the jetty, that's been huge for me. So I've been for the fly, I've actually been swinging a lot of flies lately. So just kind of drifting flies down deep and letting them get down deep. And I've had a pretty high success rate doing that when we're not finding them in the bait pods.
Hmm.
So it's a different way. And you kind of got to let your client know what he's getting into. It's not that visual experience of sight fishing for him like you'd expect in the Keys, but just kind of adapting and overcoming the last few years. And we've had some bait
Yeah.
pod days, but they're just not as good as they have been. So hopefully this next year we're gonna get into it hard and heavy again. But yeah, last 2 years have
Are
been
you
tough.
using I know you said an intermediate line, but are you
Yep.
throwing like a heavier, like a dumbbell eye, lead eye? Are you
So
still doing a normal, like large?
yeah, I just throw like those large mullet patterns. They're like 5 inches or so, just bait fish patterns. And I'll tie some lead wire in there just to kind of help them ride true. But
Hmm.
nothing really weighted. I throw
Okay.
a lot of
So
what are
no,
those
no, none
little.
of this stuff. None of their
No, not
designs.
really. No.
Just the wire on it,
Yep.
and then
Just
the
some.
intermediate sinking line.
Yeah, and I'll run a
Hmm.
short leader on that, probably like a 6 foot leader on it, not much at all.
Hmm.
And it's
Check this
kind
out.
of It's versatile because you can sight fish with it, or you can let it kind of swing down and get them down if they're a little bit deeper. So that's been the huge thing with the live scope is kind of seeing where they're sitting and which way they're facing. Typically in those bait pods, we're seeing them on the northeast side of that pokey pod, kind of pushing with them, and just naturally kind of learn that over the years where to hit them. But the last few years, the bait pods have just kind of been fickle and hit or miss. So kind of just chasing them wherever I can. And luckily, we do have that structure here with that big jetty. So.
Are you netting these baits and throwing live bait at them?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'll go net a bunch of pogies early in the morning, and then sometimes, man, I've even found you get some fresh ones, put them on ice and freeze them, and cut the tail off. A lot of those work as well. But
A dead bait.
yeah, they were
Really?
killing the dead bait this year. Yeah,
Wow.
they loved it.
Are you
I'll throw
doing
out a little
like
bit of array of stuff. I'll throw out some crab. I'll throw out live bait, dead bait, a free line with the live pogie on it. Um, and then in the
what's your hook
mullet run.
choice?
What's that?
What size hook are you doing for those? Like a 5 or 6
Like
out?
yeah, like a 5-6 hot, something like that. A little trocar
Okay.
circle hook usually. But and then just depending on if
I'm
I'm
big
throwing
on
live
these
or
here.
what you got.
The inline circles from
Yep.
owner,
Yep.
5 and 6 out. Just it really
Yep.
depends on the size of bait you're using, the size of the
Sure.
fish. But I like having enough gap in the hook that when I have that bait on there, the
Yep.
bait doesn't interfere with the hook gap. I
Hook
can
cup.
still grab that fish. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I don't want to put too heavy of a wire hook and the
You
fish,
can't pierce the mouth.
yeah, and the fish don't want to eat because they see the
Sure.
hook. So there's a
Sure.
fine line there of finding, you know, I want to go as heavy as I can
Right.
to not break off and to make sure I have good hook set, but I want to go as light as I can so they actually eat it. So
Yeah.
there's figuring that out and playing that out.
Absolutely.
What about artificials? You ever
Oh
throw
man, the
artificial stuff
artificial
out?
game here. So I'll throw some hard baits, but most of the time, just like with the redfish, I have my confidence baits I go to. So I'm huge on the little DOAs, the bait busters. They are
What
probably
color's
the
your
number
favorite?
one thing you'll see. That purple speckly, yep, that one. Yep, that
I
purple
like
flashy
going
one.
the purple flashy one. They
Hmm.
have numbers and specific names, and I can't keep them straight. Every time I go to the DOA warehouse and
You got too many
talk to
options.
Mark and
Yeah.
Chris, and they're like, "You want a 305, a 317?" I'm like, "Oh, bro, let's open the box. That one and that one and that one and that one." Those are ones I have no idea how they keep them straight.
Yeah.
And it's the same number no matter what lure you're doing. If you're doing the cow shad tail or
Oh,
the
good to know.
soft
Okay.
jerk, or they're all the same number. It just depends on which one. If I'm wrong with that, don't quote me. But I'm pretty confident on that. I like throwing the
I like
purple.
it. Yep,
I
that's my
like the
favorite go-to.
black and
That
gold.
one, killer. The silver and black as well.
I like the gold and green.
Yep, that one's
They've got
working.
different versions. They got a trolling version, which is a little bit
I use the
deeper
trolling
and
model
heavier.
just because yeah, and it's a thicker hook. I was bending out some of what's the other model? Is a sinking model maybe?
Yeah.
It's like the in between the floating. Yeah, that trolling model is huge. I really like that hook on that one. But yeah, other than that, I've been throwing some Yozuri hard baits, some stuff. There's one
Like
called
a lip bait? Like a
no,
lip
not a
twist?
lip bait. No, it's just like a twitch bait, but I'm just reeling them real
Hmm.
slow to where they're just kind of riding straight. I
Huh.
find any twitch or any movement seems to really get them finicky around here. So I just kind of get something that really is just easy, riding true straight through the water.
Hmm.
And then on fly, I've been using a lot of the those mangum tails. They foul up and they break a lot, but man, if you're just swinging flies and you're just drifting them off the boat, they last forever. And if
Huh.
that gets in front of a fish or even blind casting, man, it drives them nuts. They love that little eel pattern.
I did it was summer of 2012. I remember it. We joke about that summer, that trip.
Yeah,
Um, we came up with a lot. We had a great trip. It was me and a group of friends. We went down to Island Rock. No, we were in Marathon, excuse me.
yeah.
I remember we just checked in. This is the first time I'd been to the Keys as an adult. It was just me, a bunch of friends going fishing. Fishing was my
Yeah,
my main focus.
Sure.
And I remember we got there and we drove over the vodka cut, and I was like, I'm going to check this place out tonight. There's a lot of lights under this bridge. I'm going to check this
Yeah.
place out. And so I went there, and there were tarpon busting baits and rolling, and I threw a number 10 excuse me, a number 10 Rapala X Wrap,
Oh
black
yeah.
and silver. It's a lipped bait, a jerk bait.
Sure.
I use, and we'll do a number 10 or a number 12. Both of those are really, really good for tarpon.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of throwing treble hooks at tarpon. I like having
Scary.
a single J hook with a
Yeah.
bigger gap.
Yep.
But man, I've caught a lot of tarpon, especially down in the Keys on that bait, because it looks just like another, like
Sure.
what they're chasing. It looks like a bait fish that they're
Yeah.
chasing.
Yeah.
And the hard thing though, and you're right, I get that, but with moving it too much. But when you got these big schools of bait coming through, I
It's
really
just
think
any erratic movement, I'm sure.
yeah, like
Yeah.
you can really blend in if you're not careful. And these
Sure.
fish are keyed in on one specific thing that they want to eat. And
Yeah.
if you're not standing out some, I think it can really turn off the bite for you. But listen,
Sure.
Jeremiah, it's been great having you. People want to get a hold of you. Where can they find you? What's your website?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's ameliafishingadventures.com. Instagram Amelia Fishing Adventures, and then number is 904-441-2444.
Awesome. I'll put all of your information on the description of the show.
Killer.
Dude, so good to have you on here on Captain's Log Radio.
Thanks for
Appreciate
having me.
you.
It's great to
Yeah,
be
dude,
here.
we got to get together and go fishing soon, man. It's been
Absolutely. It's been too long.
Well, I'll get back with you soon. We'll figure a date out and we'll get out there. Listen, this is Captain Jonathan Moss. I appreciate you guys listening to the Captain's Log Radio Show. We will see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.